Hello, everybody. We are live. And everybody has forsaken me. There's nobody in the chat right now. I'm very disappointed. No, it's okay. It's totally okay. I know a lot of people catch it on the replay, so that's cool. So we have Mary Lou with us again, but I don't have the live cam set up. That's the words I'm looking for. I'm a little bit migraine brain tonight, so please excuse that. And wow, it takes a while for it to go live. I just saw the delay. Oh, Lawrence is here. Yay. Hi, Lawrence. How are you doing? Good to see you. If anybody doesn't know Lawrence, you should. He is a wonderful man, and he always checks in on me to see how I'm doing. So, and I thank him for that. So, my Montana friend. That's the migraine brain. I told you, I'm not all together tonight. Not all here. But we are starting on chapter 11, which may seem like we're close to the end, but chapter 11 is 25 pages long. Hey, Survival's in the house. Yo, how you doing, bro? Good to see you. Oh, man. So, yeah. 25 pages in this chapter, so it's going to be a long one. It's going to take more than one session, maybe, three. So, but this is a fun chapter. It's don't bother children when they're skateboarding, which is something that as adults, we have a hard time not doing. We want to protect children. They are precious to us, and when they're doing things that are scary to us, that we know that they could get hurt, we want to rush in and, just wrap arms around them, but you can't, cover kids with bubble wrap. It doesn't work like that. Survival said, let the kids dance. Yes. From Footloose. I remember that movie. And yeah, it's like, I remember my parents didn't even know where I was as a kid. So this like helicopter parenting stuff that goes on nowadays is really, really creepy to me. That seems a little too codependent. But then you have all these Karens this one woman, her child was playing in the front yard of their apartment complex. And she had Child Protective Services called on her because that wasn't safe enough. And it's like, oh, these Karens are just out of control. It's like, do you remember when you were a kid and you used to run around everywhere and, there were no cell phones and you didn't tell your parents what house you were going to because they assumed you weren't going to anybody's house? They assumed that you were outside and running around. And when the street lights came on, that was when it was time to go home. That's what I remember as a kid. There wasn't all this safety and stuff. So Survival says, I was a no helmet, no supervision kid after all the chores were done and passed inspection. Exactly. Your parents were like, get the hell out of the house. They didn't want you in it. They wanted some peace and quiet. So we didn't have these huge houses that, you can be in one corner of the house and your kids in another corner of the house and you never hear one another. That just didn't exist back then. Survival says, yep, be home before dark. Absolutely. Well, sometimes, it was a little dark before the streetlights came on. Depending on what time of year it was, because they didn't always have nowadays they have light sensors and they come on automatically when it's dark enough. But then, it used to be that they didn't have those and they had to manually set the times. So in the fall, it was really nice because they were still set for summer hours. So it would get dark and the streetlights still wouldn't be on yet. And you could stay up for a while. It was cool. So, hey, Shaman, good to see you. Glad you're here. So, and Survival says, oh, yeah, we were always push the limits. Absolutely. And our parents, as long as you weren't back really, really late, they didn't mind, and they didn't know where you were ever, and it was no big deal. It's like, I don't know where this overprotective parenting started, but it's definitely here. And, we're going to talk about it in this chapter today, about how bad it's gotten, and that kids need a little bit of danger in their lives. In order to learn how to function in the world, we have to deal with things that are unsafe, because there's no way. I mean, what are you going to do when your kids turn 18 and go off to college? They're going to do all sorts of wild and crazy stuff without knowing limits or how to critically think about situations. And that's how these kids get in all sorts of trouble, is that, they were overprotected before they went into college. They go into college and they go nuts and, join Antifa and stuff like that. It's like, oh my gosh, we've really ruined, millennials going down from there is kind of like, oh my gosh, I feel so sorry for those kids. But anyway, here we are on chapter 11. Rule 11, do not bother children while they're skateboarding. Danger and mastery. There was a time when kids skateboarded on the west side of Sydney Smith Hall at the University of Toronto, where I work. Sometimes I stood there and watched them. There are rough, wide, and shallow concrete steps there leading up from the street to the front entrance, accompanied by a tubular iron handrail about 2.5 inches diameter and about 20 feet long. The crazy kids, almost always boys, would pull back about 15 yards from the top of the steps. Then they would place a foot on their boards and skate like mad to get up some speed. Just before they collided with the handrail, they would reach down, grab the board with a single hand, and jump onto the top of the rail, sliding all the way down its length. He calls it board sliding. That's what we called gleaming the cube back in the day. There was a movie called that. Board sliding their way down the length, propelling themselves off and landing, sometimes gracefully, still atop their boards, sometimes painfully off of them. Either way, they were soon back at it. Some might call that stupid. Maybe it was. But it was brave. I thought those kids were amazing. I thought they deserved a pat on the back and some honest admiration. Of course it was dangerous. Danger was the point. They wanted to triumph over danger. They would have been safer in protective equipment, but that would have ruined it. They weren't trying to be safe. They were trying to become competent. And it's competence that makes people as safe as they truly can be. I wouldn't dare to do what those kids were doing. Not only that, I certainly couldn't climb a construction crane like a certain type of modern daredevil evident on YouTube, and of course, people who work on construction cranes. I don't like heights, although the 25,000 feet to which airlines ascend is so high that it doesn't bother me. I have flown several times in a carbon fiber stunt plane, even doing a hammer roll, and that was okay, although it's very physically and mentally demanding. To perform a hammer roll, you pilot the plane straight up vertically until the force of gravity makes it stall. Then it falls backwards, corkscrewing until eventually it flips and noses straight down, after which you pull out of the dive. Or you don't do another hammerhead roll. He says, but I can't skateboard, especially down handrails, and I can't climb cranes. In the Navy, the Brown Shoe Navy that deals with all the airplanes, they said that there were 2 types of landings. There's, 3 technically. There's a bad landing. But we're going to talk about the 2 types of good landings. There's a good landing, and that's any landing that you can walk away from. And then there's a great landing, And that's any landing that you can walk away from and still use the plane. So, hey, we got Justice in the house. We got DC Irish in the house. Justice says, Lord of the Flies was a big place in my life upon high school. Yep. That's Lord. I mean, you get kids alone and it's pretty vicious. I mean, they're little terrorists. A 4-year-old will terrorize your entire house if you let them. So, yeah. And DC Irish says, best plane I was ever in. I jumped out of that. Yes. We have a lot of skydivers here at our local small municipal airport. They do a lot of that stuff, paragliding, all that. And oh my gosh, it's so much fun. But, you know, it's dangerous, obviously. And, you know, once a year or once every other year, there's somebody who has a really bad accident, and you see that, you know, red helicopter flying down to Denver to get them to, you know, the elite hospital teams to get them emergency care. You know, so, I mean, how are you going to learn to take that kind of danger as an adult if you don't learn how to deal with danger as a kid? I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. So, Justice says, best plane I was in was when I was forced to learn how to fly. That's cool. My eyes are not good enough to learn how to fly, but that's something that I always wanted to do. I'm just one of those people who gets to be a passenger or jump out of it. One of the two. DC says, I have a few months left to wait before I jump again. That's cool. That's cool. You know, you have to learn how to be careful. You pack your own chute, all that kind of stuff. You know, you don't let anybody else pack your chute. You are responsible for your ability to land. You know, it's not anybody else's. And that kind of stuff, you know, that kind of personal responsibility is not only what keeps us safe in these activities, but it also helps us in dealing with anything else in the world, you know, that you're not blaming somebody else like, oh, the drug made me do it, or, oh, the drink made me do it. No, I did it and I was intoxicated. So I was too stupid to be in my right mind. And I was the one who, you know, nobody held a gun to my head to put that drink in my mouth or that pill down my throat. You know, personal responsibility doesn't seem to exist anymore. So, I'm sorry, I'm chatting a lot tonight. I like it. My sister packed parachutes for the Navy jumpers to go on missions. Yeah, but the Navy is triple redundant on that stuff. So the Navy is super safe. I really enjoyed being married to the Navy. So, but that's cool. That's really cool. Tell your sister that I'm impressed by that. DC Irish says 278 jumps. Wow. Going for 800 before the end of the year. We got to have a celebration for that. Let me know when you hit 800. That's going to be awesome. Wow. Oh my gosh. Yes, flying. So anyway, Sydney Smith Hall faces another street on the east side. Along that street, named St. George, ironically enough, the university installed a series of roughed, hard-edged concrete plant boxes sloping down to the roadway. The kids used to go out there too and board slide along the box edges as they did along the concrete surround of a sculpture adjacent to the building. That didn't last very long. Little steel brackets known as skate stoppers, those you'll see them on handrails, and it looks like the ring that they use on rebar. You know, you've got the handrail and then there's that bump, and then you got the handrail and then there's that bump. I know exactly what he's talking about. Skate stoppers soon appeared every 2 or 3 feet along those edges. When I first saw them, I remembered something that happened in Toronto several years previously. 2 weeks before the elementary school classes started, throughout the city, all the playground equipment disappeared. The legislation governing such things had changed, and there was a panic about insurability. The playgrounds were hastily removed, even though they were sufficiently safe, grandfathered regarding their insurability, and often paid for, and quite recently, by parents. So the parents bought these things and they ripped them all out. This meant no playgrounds at all for more than a year. During this time, I often saw bored but admirable kids charging around on the roof of our local school. It was that or scrounge about the dirt with the cats and the less adventurous children. I say sufficiently safe about the demolished playgrounds because when playgrounds are made too safe, either kids stop playing in them or start playing in unintended ways. Kids need playgrounds dangerous enough to remain a challenge. People, including children, who are people too after all, don't seek to minimize risk. They seek to optimize it. They drive and walk and love and play so that they achieve what they desire, but they push themselves a bit at the same time too, so that they continue to develop. Thus, if things are made too safe, people, including children, start to figure out ways to make them dangerous again. When untrammeled and encouraged, we prefer to live on the edge. There, we can still be both confident in our experience and confronting the chaos that helps us develop. We're hardwired for that reason, to enjoy risk, some of us more than others. We feel invigorated and excited when we work to optimize our future performance while playing in the present. Otherwise, we lumber about sloth-like, unconscious, uninformed, and careless. Overprotected, we will fail when something is dangerous, unexpected, and full of opportunity suddenly makes its appearance, as it inevitably will. The skate stoppers are unattractive. They surround the nearby sculpture. The surround of the nearby sculpture would have had to have been badly damaged by diligent board sliders before it would look as mean as it does now, studded with metal like a pit bull's collar. The large plant boxes have metal guards placed at irregular intervals across their tops, and this, in addition to the wear caused by the skateboards, produces a dismal impression of poor design, resentment, and badly executed afterthought. It gives the area, which was supposed to be beautiful by the sculpture and vegetation, a generic industrial / prison / mental institution / work camp look of the kind that appears when builders and public officials do not like or trust the people that they serve. The sheer harsh ugliness of the solution makes a lie of the reasons for its implementation. There was something, I was watching a couple of videos yesterday about how they tried in California to fill up all the skate parks with sand so that people wouldn't congregate there during COVID. And these kids made lines with buckets and shovels and shoveled all that sand out of there. Or they left just enough sand in to make the skate park perfect for motorbikes. So that's some of the unintended consequences. You know, they're trying to make it safe. And they end up making it better designed for something that is even less safe. So, Irish left us. Sorry, I missed that. I was reading. But yeah, later Irish. Minister Brandon said, I didn't realize how much work running a ministry site takes. Oh, yeah, it takes a lot of work. Good luck with that. You're going to need volunteers. And if you need them, there's a great site for that. We can talk later about how to get volunteers to help you. There's plenty of them out there, and they'd be happy to help you out. And I've gotten some really competent people, you know, just putting that stuff out. So Survival says, this is why they started building skate parks. Yes, To a large extent, yes. But in some areas, like Longmont has a couple of skate parks, but in some urban areas, it's like you got to drive to get out to a skate park, and it's not even worth it. So, rope swings that the big kids make, always ghetto. Yep. And always dangerous. Yeah. Completely agree. My cousin got his hair caught in one of those tire swings, and we had to cut him loose from the tire swing because it was a bad scene. Yeah. So Minister Brandon says, okay, I know how much it takes. I've been doing it for a very long time. Okay, sorry, I'll back off. Didn't know. I didn't know if that was a new thing or an old thing. I apologize. So, okay. Justice says, jumping off the roof to drop in and do a trick on the skateboarder climbing up buildings after curfew. Yep, I know about that. How many of you did the invisible rope trick with cars? I don't know that one. You'll have to explain that one. Shaman says, right, survival, climb up to the suicide branch. The danger is what made it fun and scary. Yeah, people want that rush. They're looking for that rush. And if you don't give them some safe way to do it in the real world, what are they going to turn to? Drugs. Duh. You want to get them, hooked on drugs for that rush? Or do you want to have them, going out and having adventures? I prefer the adventure, frankly, but Brandon said, I never skateboarded, but I roller skated and have women flip over me when I was 7 years old. I decided not to go on teen nights anymore for a while. Oh, that must have seemed, I bet they just thought you were the most darling thing in the world. That's great. So, success and resentment. If you're in the hardback, we are on page 288. All right. If you read The Depth of Psychologists, Freud and Jung, for example, as well as their precursor, Friedrich Nietzsche, you learn that there's a dark side to everything. Freud developed deeply into the latent, implicit content of dreams, which were often aimed, as his opinions, at the expression of some improper wish. Jung believed that every act of social propriety was accompanied by its evil twin, its unconscious shadow. Nietzsche investigated the role played by what he termed resentment in motivating what were ostensibly selfless actions and often exhibited all too publicly. So we'll get into the quote here. For that man be delivered from revenge. That is for me the bridge to its highest hope and a rainbow after long storms. The tarantulas, of course, would have it otherwise. What justice means to us is precisely that the world be filled with the storms of our revenge. Thus they speak to each other. We shall wreak vengeance and abuse on all whose equals we are not. Thus do the tarantula hearts vow. And will to equality shall henceforth be the name for virtue, and against all that has power we want to raise our clamor. You preachers of equality, the tyrant mania of impotence clamors thus out of you for equality. Your most secret ambitions to be tyrants thus shroud themselves in words of virtue. And haven't we seen that? I'm being so virtuous. I'm being so virtuous. Stop what you're doing because you're not being virtuous. It's exactly what a Karen is. The incomparable English essayist George Orwell knew this sort of thing well. In 1937, he wrote The Road to Wigan Pier, which was in part a scathing attack on upper-class British socialists. This despite being inclined towards socialism himself. In the first half of the book, Orwell portrays the appalling conditions faced by UK miners in the 1930s. Several dentists have told me that in industrial districts, a person over 30 with any of his or her own teeth is something to be an abnormality. In Wigan, various people gave me their opinion that it is best to get shut of your teeth early in life as possible. Teeth is just a misery, one woman said to me. A Wigan Pier coal miner had to walk, crawl would be a better word, given the height of the mine shaft, up to 3 miles underground in the dark, banging his head, scraping his back, just to get his 7.5-hour shift of back-breaking work. After that, he crawled back. It is incomparable, perhaps, to climbing a smallish mountain before and after your day's work, stated Orwell. None of the time spent crawling was paid. Orwell wrote The Road to Wigan Pier for the Left Book Club, a socialist publishing group that released a select volume every month. After reading the first half of his book, which deals directly with the miner's personal circumstances, it is impossible not to feel sympathy for the working poor. Only a monster could keep his heart hardened through the accounts of the lives Orwell described. It is not long since conditions in the mines were worse than they are now. They are still living a few very old women who in their youth have worked underground, crawling on all fours and dragging tubs of coal. They used to go on doing this even when they were pregnant. In the book's second half, however, Orwell turned his gaze to a different problem: the comparative unpopularity of socialism in the UK at the time, despite the clear and painful inequality observable everywhere. He concluded that the tweed-wearing, armchair philosophizing, victim-identifying, pity and contempt dispensing social reformer types frequently did not like the poor, as they claimed. Instead, they just hated the rich. They disguised their resentment and jealousy with piety, sanctimony, and self-righteousness. Things in the unconscious, or in the social justice dispensing leftist front, haven't changed much today. It was because of Freud, Jung, Nietzsche, and Orwell that I always wondered, what then do you stand against? Whenever I hear someone say too loudly, I stand for this, the question seems particularly relevant if the same someone is complaining, criticizing, or trying to change someone else's behavior. I believe it was Jung who developed the most surgically wicked of all psychoanalytic dicta. If you cannot understand why someone did something, look at the consequence and infer the motivation. This is a psychological scalpel. It's not always a suitable instrument. It can cut too deeply or in the wrong places. That is perhaps a last resort opinion. Nonetheless, there are times when its application proves enlightening. If the consequences of placing skate stoppers on plant boxes and sculpture bases, for example, is unhappy adolescent males and brutal aesthetics discharge of beauty, then perhaps that was the aim. When someone claims to be acting from their highest principle for the good of others, there is no reason to assume that the person's motives are genuine. People motivated to make things better usually aren't concerned with changing other people, or if they are, they take responsibility for making the same changes to themselves and first. Beneath the production of rules stopping the skateboarders from doing highly skilled, courageous, and dangerous things, I see the operation of an insidious and profoundly anti-human spirit. And that's something. These people that are, I'm just trying to make sure that it's safe. You know, oh, these skateboarders, they do such dangerous things. No, you don't care a whit about the danger that these kids are taking or anything like that. You don't want them to have any fun. You think that them using public spaces for fun and entertainment and stuff like, oh, you shouldn't do that. I mean, you've seen the no skateboarding signs around and stuff like that. And it's like, come on. Who put those up there? Somebody who was scared. Scared of the skateboarder, scared of the kid going that fast, scared because, oh my God, they might knock me over. It's all finger wagging and nagging and awful stuff like that. So yeah, I don't agree. I don't agree with it either. I've got the same thing as attitude as Jordan Peterson. So let me go back to the comments here because you guys are saying some good stuff. So Minister Brandon said, I never skateboard. We got to that. Justice said, I had a lot of health risks and I purposely took it to another level to have fun. Yes. Tell me I'm not capable of it and I'll find a way to do it. Exactly. It's like, oh, you want to dare me? It's like life is dangerous enough on its own. With cancer and everything else that goes on inside our own bodies, the risk outside our bodies is not nearly as much as it is inside. So, I'm glad you took those risks, Justice, and I'm glad you went to that next level. That's very courageous of you and very cool. So, Minister Brandon said, I roller skated for over 21 years. My younger cousin worked in the skate room and I got in the back door for free. There you go. Oh my gosh. Okay, spilling emergency. We will be right back. Holy crap. Dog, get down. I've now got Red Bull all over me. So we are going to take a break and I am going to do this. Let's listen to Jordan Peterson. Nope, not this one. Nope, not this one. There we go.
One of the things that's happened in our society is that we seem to have concluded that strong men are dangerous. And that's partly because we think Western culture is a tyrannical patriarchy, and the only reason you get to the top is because you misuse power. So all the men who are at the top of the hierarchy are all misusing their power, and they're all tyrannical. And all the guys who have the aim and ambition to achieve that are just tyrants in training. That's sort of the basic attitude that we have towards our own culture and towards young men now. Everything about that is pathological and inexcusable and shameful.
I used to watch kids skateboard. I liked watching those kids. I liked watching skateboarders do those crazy things because they're trying to become competent. They're facing danger. They don't want the damn protective gear. It's like, no, I don't want to wear a helmet. I want to expose myself to this danger. It's not that I'm stupid. And the kids are often shooed away. It's like, wait a second. They're practicing being courageous. They're practicing mastering something in the face of danger. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. Don't bother children. Don't bother children. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. Don't bother children. Don't bother children. Don't bother children when they're skateboarding. A lot of the rebellious behavior of young men in particular, which is very frowned upon in schools. It's like,
sorry about that. Freaking knocked over my soda.
That horrid phrase. It's like, leave those damn kids alone. Well, 10 years ago, they changed the insurance rules governing playgrounds. Parents had raised money for these damn playgrounds. There's nothing wrong with tore them all out. 2 weeks before school started.
Okay.
Dirt
So you'll have to wait a while.
so the kids were talking to school because they needed some danger. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children. Don't bother children. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children. Don't bother children. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. You go see a gymnast, and like the gymnast does a flawless routine. Everybody claps like mad. The judges say 9.9. And then the next person comes up and they're screwed. It's like 9.9. It was basically perfect. How can you do better than perfect? And then they do it. You can do better than perfect. They're on the edge. And they go out there and you know, watch them, feel it in your body. Everything they do is that much farther out into chaos than anything they've ever done. Pushing themselves to the absolute limit of their ability. Tell with every gesture, they're that close to making a mistake. They've taken this courageous step beyond their confidence and put everything on the line. When they land in a way that's unlike perfect. It's perfect plus. And everybody immediately leaps to their feet. And like they get a chill. And so what you've just seen is awe-inspiring. You've seen someone courageously move past perfection into the unknown. And not only ennoble themselves more, but to ennoble humanity itself. Up on your feet. It's like, yes! And then it's tens. They win the gold. Well, everyone knows what that's like. It's like a great music performance. That's feeling that placement where everything lines up. Better than perfect. Better than perfect. Better than perfect. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children. Don't bother children. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding. Don't bother children. Don't bother children. Don't bother children when you're skateboarding.
You guys are just on point with the comments tonight. Bravo. Bravo. So let me find my place again. Sorry about that. The dog jumped in my lap, got the mouse cord tangled in her feet, pulled everything off the desk that the mouse cord was behind, and one of those things was my can of Red Bull. Oh. So, all right. Let's get back here. So people are motivated to make things better, usually aren't concerned with changing other people, or if they are, they take responsibility for making the same changes to themselves and first. Beneath the production of rules stopping the skateboards from doing highly skilled, courageous, and dangerous things, I see the operation of an insidious and profound anti-human spirit. So that's where we had stopped. More about Chris. My friend Chris, whom I wrote about earlier, was possessed by such a spirit to the serious detriment of his mental health. Part of what plagued him was guilt. He attended elementary and junior high school in a number of towns up in the frigid expanses of the northernmost Alberta prairie, prior to ending up in Fairview, I wrote about earlier. Fights with native kids were a too common part of his experience during those moves. It's no overstatement to point out that such kids were, on average, rougher than white kids, or that they were touchier and they had their reasons. I knew this well from my own experience. I had a rocky friendship with a Metis kid, Renee Hack. Names and other details have been changed for the sake of privacy. When I was in elementary school, it was rocky because the situation was complex. There was a large cultural divide between Renee and me. His clothes were dirtier. He was rougher in speech and attitude. I had skipped a grade in school and was, in addition, small for my age. Renee was a big, smart, good looking kid, and he was tough. We were in grade 6 together in a class taught by my father. Renee was caught chewing gum. Renee, said my father, spit that gum out. You look like a cow. Ha ha, I laughed under my breath. Renee the cow. Renee might have been a cow, but there was nothing wrong with his hearing. Peterson, he said, after school, you're dead. Early in the morning, Renee and I had arranged to see a movie that night at the local movie theater, the Gem. It looked like that was off. In any case, the rest of the day passed quickly and unpleasantly, as it does when the threat of pain lurks. Renee was more than capable of giving me a good pounding. After school, I took off for the bike stands outside the school as fast as I could, but Renee beat me there. We circled around the bikes, him on one side, me on the other. There were characters in a Keystone Cops. We were characters in a Keystone Cops short. As long as I kept circling, he couldn't catch me, but my strategy couldn't last forever. I yelled out that I was sorry, but he still wasn't mollified. His pride was hurt, and he wanted me to pay. I crouched down and hid behind some bikes, keeping an eye on Renee. Renee, I yelled, I'm sorry I called you a cow. Let's quit fighting. He started to approach me again, and I said, Renee, I'm sorry, and I said that, really, and I still want to go to the movies with you. This wasn't just a tactic. I meant it. Otherwise, what happened next would not have happened. Renee stopped circling. Then he stared at me. Then he broke into tears. Then he ran off. That was native white relationships in a nutshell in our hard little town. We never did go to the movies together. When my friend Chris got into it with native kids, he wouldn't fight back. He didn't feel that his self-defense was morally justified, so he just took his beatings. We took their land, he later wrote. That was wrong. No wonder they're angry. Over time, step by step, Chris withdrew from the world. It was partly his guilt. He developed a deep hatred for masculinity and masculine activity. He saw going to school or working or finding a girlfriend as part of the same process that had led to the colonization of North America and the horrible nuclear stalemate of the Cold War and the despoiling of the planet. He had read some books about Buddhism and felt that negation of his own being was ethically required in the light of the current world situation. He came to believe that the same applied to others. Oh, hey, Logic's in the house. Hey, I was hoping you'd show up. We're getting to the chapters that you haven't read yet. So, Sexy Rexy is here. All right. When I was an undergraduate, Chris was, for a while, one of my roommates. One late night, we went to a local bar. We walked home afterwards. He started to snap the side view mirrors off of parked cars, one after the other. I said, quit that, Chris. What possible good is it going to do to make the people who own those cars miserable? He told me that they were all part of the frenetic human activity that was ruining everything and that they deserved whatever they got. I said that was taking revenge on people who were just living normal lives was not going to help anything. Years later, when I was in graduate school at Montreal, Chris showed up for what was supposed to be a visit. He was aimless, however, and lost. I asked if I could help him. He ended up moving in. I was married by then, living with my wife, Tammy, and our year-old daughter, Michaela. Chris had also been friends with Tammy back in Fairview and held out hopes of more than a friendship. That complicated the situation even more, but not precisely in the manner you may think. Chris started by hating men, but he ended by hating women. He wanted them, but he had rejected education and career and desire. He smoked heavily and was unemployed. Unsurprisingly, therefore, he was not much of an interest to women. That made him bitter. I tried to convince him that the path he had chosen was only going to lead to further ruin. He needed to develop some humility. He needed to get a life. One evening, it was Chris's turn to make dinner. When my wife came home, the apartment was filled with smoke. Hamburgers were burning furiously in the fire pan. Chris was on his hands and knees attempting to repair something that had come loose on the legs of the stove. My wife knew his tricks. She knew he was burning the dinner on purpose. He resented having to make it. He resented the feminine role, even though the household duties were split in a reasonable manner, even though he knew that all perfectly well. He was fixing the stove to provide a plausible, even credible excuse for burning the food. When she pointed out what he was doing, he played the victim, but he was deeply and dangerously furious. Part of him, and not the good part, was convinced that he was smarter than anyone else. It was a blow to his pride that she could see through his tricks. It was an ugly situation. Tammy and I took a walk up towards the local park the next day. We needed to get away from the apartment, although it was 35 below, bitterly, frigidly cold, humid and foggy. It was windy. It was hostile to life. Living with Chris was too much, Tammy said. We entered the park. The trees forked their bare branches up towards the damp gray air. A black squirrel, tail hairless from mange, gripped a leafless branch, shivered violently, struggling to hold on against the wind. What was it doing out there in the cold? Squirrels are partially hibernators. They only come out in the winter when it's warm. Then we saw another and another and another and another. There were squirrels all around us in the park, all partially hairless, tails and bodies alike, all windblown all on their branches, all shaking and freezing in the deathly cold. No one else was around. It was impossible. It was inexplicable. It was exactly appropriate. We were on the stage of an absurdist play. It was directed by God. Tammy left soon after with our daughter for a few days elsewhere. I know why the squirrels did that. If you want me to explain that, let me know. Near Christmas time that same year, my younger brother and his new wife came out to visit from Western Canada. My brother also knew Chris. They all put on their winter clothes in preparation for a walk around downtown Montreal. Chris put on a long, dark winter coat. He pulled a black toque, a brimless knitted cap, far over his head. His coat was black, and as were his pants and boots. He was very tall and thin and somewhat stooped. Chris, I joked, you look like a serial killer. Ha, bloody ha. The three came back from their walk. Chris was out of sorts. There were strangers in his territory. Another happy couple. It was salt in his wounds. We had dinner pleasantly enough. We talked and ended the evening, but I couldn't sleep. Something wasn't right. It was in the air. Around 4 a.m, I had had enough and I crawled out of bed. I knocked quietly on Chris's door and went without waiting for an answer into his room. He was awake on the bed, staring at the ceiling, as I knew he would be. I sat down beside him. I knew him very well. I talked him down from his murderous rage. Then I went back to bed and slept. The next morning, my brother pulled me aside. He wanted to speak with me. We sat down. He said, "What the hell was going on last night? I couldn't sleep at all. Was something wrong?" I told my brother that Chris wasn't doing well. I didn't tell him that he was lucky to be alive, that we all were. The spirit of Cain had visited our house, but we were left unscathed. Maybe I picked up some change in scent that night when death hung in the air. Chris had a very bitter odor. He showered frequently, but the towels and sheets picked up the smell. It was impossible to get them clean. It was the product of a psyche and a body that did not operate harmoniously. A social worker I once knew, who also knew Chris, told me of her familiarity with that odor. Everyone at her workplace knew it, although they only discussed it in hushed tones. They called it the smell of the unemployable. Soon after this, I finished my postdoctoral studies. Tammy and I moved away from Montreal to Boston. We had our second baby. Now and then, Chris and I talked on the phone. He came to visit once. It went well. He had found a job in an auto parts place. He was trying to make things better. He was okay at that point, but it didn't last. I didn't see him in Boston again. Almost 10 years later, the night before Chris's 40th birthday, as it happened, he called me again. By this time, I had moved my family to Toronto. He had some news. A story he had written was going to be published in a collection put together by a small but legitimate press. He wanted to tell me that. He wrote good short stories. I had read them all. We had discussed them at length. He was a good photographer, too. He had a good creative eye. The next day, Chris drove his old pickup, the same battered beast from Fairview, into the bush. He ran a hose from the exhaust pipe into the front cab. I can see him there, looking through the cracked windshield, smoking, waiting. They found his body a few weeks later. I called my dad. My beautiful boy, he sobbed. Recently, I was invited to give a TEDx talk at a nearby university. Another professor talked first. He had been invited to speak because of his work, his genuinely fascinating technical work with computer intelligent surfaces, like computer touchscreens, but capable of being placed everywhere. He spoke instead about the threat human beings pose to the survival of the planet. Like Chris, like far too many people, he had become anti-human to the core. He had not walked as far down the road as my friend, but the same dread spirit animated them both. He stood in front of a screen displaying the endless slow pan of a blocks-long Chinese high-tech factory. Hundreds of white-suited workers stood like sterile, inhuman robots behind their assembly lines, soundlessly inserting piece A into slot B. He told the audience, filled with bright young people, of the decision he and his wife had made to limit their number of children to one. He told them that it was something that they should all consider if they wanted to regard themselves as ethical people. I felt that such a decision was properly considered, but only in his particular case, where less than one might have been even better. The many Chinese students in attendance sat solidly through his moralizing. They thought perhaps of their parents' escape from the horrors of Mao's Cultural Revolution and its one-child policy. They thought perhaps of the vast improvement in living standards and freedom provided by the same factories. A couple of them said as much in the questions provided that followed. Would the professor have reconsidered his opinions if he knew where such ideas could lead? I would like to say yes, but I don't believe it. I think that he could have known, but refused to. Worse, perhaps he knew but didn't care, or knew and was headed there voluntarily in any case. Yeah, the anti-human sentiment that exists, we need to depopulate the earth, things like that. There are too many people. What? Back in the 70s, they said we'd be eating Soylent Green by this time, and we've had more advances in farming. We're able to feed the world. I mean, it's just crazy. Oh, hey, okay, Kevin Edwards is here. Okie. So, yeah, let's focus, guys. You don't have to. You can go on your own thing if that's more a thing. Shrek was an ogre. OGAR, not OGER. Sorry, English major. Got to do the spelling thing. But yeah, it's this anti-human stance of, it's noble and beautiful to not want to have kids. No, it's not. It makes you selfish all the way throughout your life. Only by having kids can you really experience what it is to be responsible for another human being. And only by being responsible for the life of another do you realize how important it is to have self-responsibility and things like that. You know, if you don't have kids, you can stay out drinking every weekend, you know, till 2 a.m. If you have kids, you can't do that kind of crap. You know, you have stuff that you have to take care of. And I find that, you know, people who are parents are a lot more down to earth and common sense intelligent than people who don't have kids. So Survival says, on point though, you guys are all here together on our devices. We are all capable of doing something more productive. I like to listen, but then could be doing something right now to better my surrounding. Sorry about that. Yeah, we could be doing something better, but I know you guys, and I know that, there we go, silent mode. I know that you do good. I mean, I saw you plant a tree, Survival. You know, you're one of the responsible people. The people in here, the Pam fam, are responsible people. Reading this book is kind of like preaching to the choir. A network error has occurred. Is that only on my TV or is that with you guys? I think, okay, that's only on my TV. Exit YouTube. Let me see if I'm still live. Okay, Kevin Edwards says, laundry. That's what I'm doing. That's productive. That's responsible. All right, good. Glad to hear, Brandon. Thank you very much. Yeah, those network errors scare me too, but apparently it was just my TV, so it's all good. But yeah, I mean, you know, you guys are solid. Yeah, you don't need this kind of training. It's you know, you all have it. You thought about this stuff. You take personal responsibility. You're not full of ideologies that tell you to hate human beings. I mean, you are people who love fellow human beings, whether you know them or not. You know, you're the people who stop and help people on the side of the road. That's who I know you people to be. So don't take this as instruction for you. Take it as, you know, this should be a what do you call it? Verification that you're on the right path. So Survival says they teach the kids to overdo their devices. Well, yeah. And I mean, this whole COVID thing has made it even worse, where everybody wants to be on devices and not actually. But I see it improving. People are taking the masks off now. It's getting better, folks. It's getting better. So, so your kids play with this oil. I go do something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The screen is not a babysitter. But yeah, you guys are solid. You know this stuff. You understand this stuff. And you're not down that ideological path that says human beings are bad and, you know, we should just wipe ourselves from the face of the planet because then nature would do better. Well, we're a part of nature. You know, what about that don't you understand? So us doing better, I mean, like, lawnmowers of the past used to be gas guzzlers compared to the engines that they have now. They're extremely efficient. You can run a lawnmower on a gallon of gas for a couple of times that you mow the lawn. That was not the way it was when we were kids. So we keep getting more efficient with these things where we're actually doing less damage to the planet. But there are a lot of people making a lot of money by, you know, saying you should feel guilty. You know, and they use that guilt against us to then motivate us to do whatever it is that okay, I'll follow you. No, it just drives me nuts. drives me nuts. And oh yeah, ideologies are bad, but we all know that. Brandon says, I'm sorry, Pam, I'm part comedian. I can't help to heckle. No worries, no worries. I totally, I've seen you with your puppets, so I totally understand. All right. So here we go. Self-appointed judges of the human race. Oh. It has not been long since the earth seemed infinitely larger than the people who inhabited it. It was only the late 1800s that the brilliant biologist Thomas Huxley, staunch defender of Darwin and Aldous Huxley's grandfather, told the British Parliament that it was literally impossible for mankind to exhaust the oceans. Yeah. Their power of generations was simply too great, as far as he could determine, compared to even the most assiduous human predators. It's been an even shorter 50 years since Rachel Carson's The Silent Spring ignited the environmental movement. 50 years. That's nothing. That's like, I'm almost 50. That's nothing. To go from we can't kill off the seas to we are successfully killing off the seas. Yeah. That's not even yesterday. We've only just developed the conceptual tools and technologies that allow us to understand the web of life, however imperfectly. We deserve a bit of sympathy in consequence for the hypothetical outrage of our destructive behavior. Sometimes we don't know any better. Sometimes we do know better, but haven't yet formulated any practical alternatives. It's not as if life is easy for human beings, after all, even now. And it's only a few decades ago that the majority of human beings were starving, diseased, and illiterate. Wealthy as we are, increasingly, everywhere, we still only live decades that can be counted on our fingers. But at present, it is the rare and fortunate family that does not contain at least one member with a serious illness, and all will face that problem eventually. We do what we can to make the best of things in our vulnerability and fragility, and the planet is harder on us than we are on it. We can cut ourselves some slack. Yeah, I mean, this pandemic should show people that, nature can, shake us like a cold if she wanted to. I mean, all we need is enough volcanoes going off at the same time and we're screwed, but people seem to think that I'll stop moralizing. Human beings, after all, are seriously remarkable creatures. We have no peers, and it's not clear that we have any real limits. Things happen now that appeared humanly impossible, even at the same time in recent past when we began to wake up our planet-sized responsibility. A few weeks before writing this, I happened across two videos juxtaposed on YouTube. One showed the Olympic gold medalist vault from 1956. The other, the Olympic silver medal vault from 2012. It didn't even look like the same sport or the same animal. What Michaela Moroni did in 2012 would have been considered superhuman in the 50s. Parkour, a sport derived from French military obstacle course training, is amazing, as is free running. I watch compilations of such performances with unabashed admiration. Some of the kids jump off of 3-story buildings without injury. It's dangerous and amazing. Crane climbers are so brave that it rattles the mind. The same goes for extreme mountain bikers, freestyle snowboarders, and surfers of 50-foot waves, and skateboarders. The boys who shot up the Columbine High School, whom we discussed earlier, had appointed themselves judges of the human race. Like the TEDx professor, although much more extreme, like Chris, my doomed friend. For Eric Harris, the more literate of the two killers, human beings were a failed and corrupt species. Once a presupposition such as that is accepted, its inner logic will inevitably manifest itself. If something is a plague, as David Attenborough has it, or cancer, as the Club of Rome claimed, the person who eradicates it is a hero, a veritable planetary savior in this case. A real Messiah might follow through with his rigorous moral logic and eliminate himself as well. This is what mass murderers, driven by near infinite resentment, typically do. Even their own being does not justify the existence of humanity. In fact, they kill themselves precisely to demonstrate the purity of their commitment to annihilation. No one in the modern world may, without objection, express the opinion that existence would be bettered by the absence of Jews, blacks, Muslims, or Englishmen. Why then is it virtuous to propose that the planet might be better off if there were fewer people on it? Are you listening, Bill Gates? I'll say it again for Mr. Gates sitting in the back row. Why then is it virtuous to propose that the planet might be better off if there were fewer people on it? I can't help but see a skeletal, grinning face, gleeful at the possibility of the apocalypse, hiding not so very far behind such statements. And why does it often seem to be the people standing so visibly against prejudice who so often appear obligated to denounce humanity itself? Good question. I have seen university students, particularly those in the humanities, suffer genuine declines in their mental health from being philosophically berated by such defenders of the planet for their existence as members of the human species. It's worse, I think, for young men. As privileged beneficiaries of the patriarchy, their accomplishments are considered unearned. As possible adherents of rape culture, they're sexually suspect. Their ambitions make them plunderers of the planet. They're not welcome. At junior high, at high school, and university level, they're falling behind educationally. When my son was 14, we discussed his grades. He was doing very well, he said, matter-of-factly, for a boy. I inquired further. Everyone knew, he said, that girls do better in school than boys. His intonation indicated surprise at my ignorance of something so self-evident. While writing this, I received the latest edition of The Economist. The cover story, the weaker sex, meaning males. In modern universities, women now make up more than 50% of the students in more than 2/3 of all disciplines. Boys are suffering in the modern world. They are more disobedient negatively or more independent positively than girls, and they suffer for this throughout their pre-university educational career. They are less agreeable, agreeableness being a personality trait associated with compassion, empathy, and avoidance of conflict, and less susceptible to anxiety and depression, at least after both sexes hit puberty. Boys' interests tilt towards things, girls' interests tilt towards people. Strikingly, these differences, strongly influenced by biological factors, are more pronounced in the Scandinavian societies where gender equality has been pushed hardest. This is the opposite of what would be expected by those who insist even more loudly that gender is a social construct. It isn't. This isn't a debate. The data are in. Boys like competition, and they don't like to obey, particularly when they are adolescents. During that time, they are driven to escape their families and establish their own independent existence. There is little difference between doing that and challenging authority. Schools, which were set up in the late 1800s precisely to inculcate obedience, do not take kindly to the provocations and daring behavior, no matter how tough-minded and competent it might show a boy or girl to be. Other factors play their role in the decline of boys. Girls will, for example, play boys' games, but boys are much more reluctant to play girls' games. This is in part because it is admirable for a girl to win with competing with a boy. It's also okay for her to lose to a boy. For a boy to beat a girl, however, is often not okay. And just as often, it is even less okay for him to lose. Imagine that a boy and a girl, age 9, get into a fight. Just for engaging, the boy is highly suspect. If he wins, he's pathetic. If he loses, well, his life might as well be over. Beat up by a girl. Girls can win by winning in their own hierarchy, by being good at what girls value as girls. They can add to this victory by winning in the boys' hierarchy. Boys, however, can only win by winning in the male hierarchy. They will lose status among girls and boys by being good at what girls value. It costs them in reputation among the boys and in attractiveness among the girls. Girls aren't attracted to boys who are their friends, even though they might like them, whatever that means. They are attracted to the boys who win status contests with other boys. If you're male, however, you can't just hammer a female as hard as you would a male. Boys can't or won't play truly competitive games with girls. Well, except, it isn't clear how they can win. As the game turns into a girls' game, therefore, the boys leave. Are the universities, particularly the humanities, about to become a girls' game? Is this what we want? The situation in the universities and in educational institutions in general is far more problematic than the basic statistics indicate. If you eliminate the so-called STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs, excluding psychology, the female-male ratio is even more skewed. Almost 80% of the students majoring in the fields of healthcare, public administration, and psychology, education, which comprise 1/4 of all degrees, are female. The disparity is still rapidly increasing. At this rate, there will be very few men in most university disciplines in 15 years. This is not good news for men. It might even be catastrophic for men, but it's also not good news for women. So we've got a little over the 1 hour mark, so I'm going to give you guys a break. I'm going to get to these comments. Straight grown women like confident men. Yes! You can't make a confident man out of a sheltered, soft boy. Also, yes. I mean, what we're doing, these later generations are going to pay so much. It's going to be so hard. And, I'm going to blame the boomers. I'm going to go there. The baby boomers were all about that 60s era stuff with the introduction of birth control, the women's rights movement, burn your bras, all that kind of stuff. My parents were silent generation. They were pre-baby boomers, and they raised me, Generation X, a lot different. And even my sister, who's technically the beginning of the millennials, raised her a lot different than these baby boomers have raised their kids, which are obviously the millennials and Gen Z and all that kind of stuff. So, it's crazy. But I'm going to do a second break here because it looks like Mary Lou may want to go home. So I'm going to put up some Jordan Peterson so he can take smoke breaks, bathroom breaks, that kind of thing. And we will be back in a little while. I'm going to stop sharing that screen and I'm going to start sharing this one. Oh my goodness. So we're going to go over here. We're going to go to You're Oppressed. This is a great song, by the way.
There's a big problem here. The problem is, it's true. You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. God only knows why. You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. Maybe you're too short or you're not as beautiful as you could be, or your grandparent was a serf. Likely, because almost everybody's great-grandparent was. You know, you're not as smart as you could be, and you have a sick relative, and you have your own physical problem. Frankly, you're a mess. Frankly, you're a mess. You're oppressed in every possible way, including your ancestry and your biology, for the entire sum of human history has conspired to produce fertilized you with all your individual pathological problems. It's like, yes! True! You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. Okay, but the problem is that it is true, and so if you take the oppressed, you have to fractionate them and fractionate them and fractionate them and fractionate them. And so it's like, you're a woman. Yeah, okay, well, I'm a black woman. Well, I'm a black woman who has 2 children. Well, I'm a black woman who has 2 children, and one of them isn't very healthy. And then, well, I'm a Hispanic woman, and I have a genius son who doesn't have any money, so that he can't go to university. My husband is an alcoholic brute. It's like, well, yeah, that sucks too. And so, let's fix all your oppression. Let's fix all your oppression. Let's fix all your. And we'll take every single thing into account, and then we'll fix yours too. We'll take every single thing into account. No, you won't. No, you won't. No, you won't. Because you can't. You can't. It's technically impossible. You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. First of all, you can't even list all the ways that you're oppressed. Second, how are you going to weight them? Third, who's going to decide? That's the bloody thing. Who's going to decide? Who's going to decide? That's the thing. You have to fractionate the oppressed all the way down to the level of the individual. And that's what the West figured out. It's not an accident that the axiomatic Western individual is someone who is unfit, cross, and tortured. It's like, yes, right, exactly. You're oppressed, 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 you're oppressed. So what do you do about that? Well, I thought about that for a long time too. It's like, well, you don't get together the damn law. All that does is allow you to be as horrible as you can possibly imagine and suffer from none of the consequences. That's a bad idea. So how long we don't do that? Well, there's a deep idea in the West too. It's like, pick up your damn suffering and bear it. Try to be a good person, so you don't make it worse. Well, that's the truth, you know?
All right, and we are back. Hello, Rising Ability. Welcome. Glad you're here. So, yeah, I got some bad news about Mary Lou. She has been getting a lot worse lately, and even my neighbor Barb has noticed it. And we actually figured out that my friend's dog may have dementia, doggy Alzheimer's, because of what she does. She'll do this pacing. Yay, Resident Ability. Good to see you too. So yeah, Lawrence. Yeah, it's she used to be able to do stuff, like make a sandwich and things like that. But like, I'll have her make a sandwich, and she'll have the ham right in front of her, and she'll say, well, where's the ham? And it's like, it's right there, and she doesn't even recognize it anymore. So, Rising Ability, love the positive energy to you all. Yes, thank you. Shaman says, sad to hear about Mary Lou. Thank you for the update. Yeah, so she forgets that my house is not her house. So what she was doing for the last 10 minutes while I was reading was just wandering from room to room to room to try and find her bedroom. And she couldn't find it. And she didn't realize that she doesn't live here. And she forgets that a lot. And it's she's like, well, I think I'll go get in my pajamas now. And it's like, Mary Lou, you don't live here. Your room isn't here. You don't have your pajamas here. And unfortunately, it's creating a lot of strife with her family because, like, she'll move things and she'll forget where she puts them. And then she thinks that her family is stealing from her when they're not. And like yesterday, we tried to get her to go home to have some sandwiches. And she would go down the steps, and at the bottom of the steps, she would turn around and come right back into my house, and then realize, oh, she was going to go get sandwiches, turn around, go down the steps, come right back up the steps. And it's just like, oh my goodness. It was so hard. It was so hard. And yeah, Mary Lou is a beautiful soul. And, she used to be this incredible nurse, who worked for 50 years in the healthcare industry. And to see her make a sandwich, take it to the other room to sit down and ask me halfway there, is this my sandwich? And then she'll move 5 feet from the door to the couch to go sit down. She'll sit down and she'll go, is this my sandwich? She just asked me that question less than a minute ago, and she's already forgotten. Lawrence, she's 87. She was born in 1934. So she's 87 right now. And she always forgets her age all the time, too. She's like, oh, my gosh, my grandmother lived until, she was 85, and that was so old. And I'm like, Mary Lou, you're 87. You're 2 years older. And I am? I'm like, yeah, and she forgets what year it is, what day of the week it is. I mean, it's so hard to see. Because I know that that John, her son, you're watching them be taken from you before they're taken from you. And to know what they were like, and then to have this happen to them. And I mean, it's like dealing with a 4-year-old. Only a 4-year-old is a little bit more competent. It's really scary in a lot of ways. Survival says, oh man, I'm so sorry. Poor Mary Lou. Yeah, I know. It's watching this is just like, I hope to God it never happens to me. I hope to God, just because not only does it make her miserable to a certain extent, because she gets lost in her own house sometimes. But it's hard for her family. So Lauren says, well, she's only 2 years older than my father. Yeah. Yeah. So, or 3 years. 3 years. Got it. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Rose for Mary Lou. So yeah, she has a hard time sitting through these lives anymore. Lauren says, I hope it never happens to my father. Well, if he's gotten to that point and it hasn't happened yet, it probably won't. She's been going through this for a while now. But it's just been getting markedly worse this year. Like she says, oh, do you want this seat? And I'm like, no, you always sit on that side of the couch. I always sit on the other side of the couch. This is the way our relationship has been for over a year, but she can't even remember it, so it's, yeah, prayers for Mary Lou. Definitely. I appreciate any prayers that you can give. But then, there's also the fear that sometimes right before they're about to die, dementia patients will get suddenly very, very lucid, and suddenly everything comes rushing back to them. And yeah, it's just, life is hard, folks. Life is hard, and be glad for every moment of it. So no way around, guys. Yep, we all live and die. Mary Lou is fortunate to have you as a friend. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I feel good to be able to give her family a break. I'm glad that she likes coming here and sitting with me. Today she called me a dear friend, so that was wonderful. But it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. At the same time, but it's the right thing to do, to love her no matter what condition she's in, and to be patient with her because it's not her fault. She wouldn't want to be this way if she had the ability to choose. It's not her fault at all. Shaman says yes, prayers, and I appreciate all your prayers for her. Because the weather will make it worse. What she eats will make it worse. Like I've stopped feeding her sugary foods because of how bad it makes her dementia. I've kind of hid that stuff from her, and I make sure to feed her, things that are more protein, things that are more healthy, that kind of thing. Today she got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and that's a lot of sugar in that. But it's not too terribly bad. Whereas before we were having like Nutella. So I've stopped doing that because it's not good for her. And yeah, definitely. Like she used to be able to drink wine, and now it's just not an option. You don't want her any more impaired than she already is. Survival says it's the right thing to do. I fear that a new generation might not feel the same way for us when we're old. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to have kids, because this kind of love for strangers and love for your neighbor does not exist among the younger generations. They'd rather not even speak to their neighbors. And I've had kids, friends of mine that were just 10 years younger than me, and they don't want to know anybody outside their social group. They won't make friends with their neighbors. They don't even know who lives next door to them, doesn't even know their names. And it's like, that's why I'm so glad to have landed in this neighborhood, because it's a bunch of older people. I'm kind of, one of the youngest people on the block. And everybody else, we want to know our neighbors. We want to know, the families that live next to us, and we want to be a part of their lives. We each do. So, it's, but yeah, it's been getting rough for her. It's been getting rough for her. And so I appreciate all your prayers, and all the love, all the good energy that you can feed her way, because she needs it. And I don't know how much longer she's going to be with us, or how much longer she's going to be able to live at that house, because she may become deteriorated to the state where she's just too dangerous not to have, 24-hour supervision. Survival says, knowing your neighbors is essential. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, those are the people who are going to, make sure that you're doing okay when a crisis hits. So Showman says, hang in there, Pam, sending support. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Positive energy to Mary Lou. Yes, mega love shout out to Mary Lou. So yeah, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. It's just, my heart breaks. My heart breaks. It, and I think maybe it was the aluminum pots that they all used and stuff when she was growing up and into adulthood and stuff like that, that we don't use anymore, because they think that it contributes to that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just it. But what can you do? But give love and do the right thing, and that's what we're trying to do. So, hey, it's Wandering Violin Mantis. I haven't seen you in so long. Oh, it's good to see you. You need to call me, honey. So I need to know how you're doing. Shellman says you're close to it. How could it not affect you? Yeah. It's good to know that my heart isn't made of stone, So yeah. And she forgets which house is hers. Do I go this way or do I go that way? And it's like, Mary Lou, you go that way. You always go that way. And you always want to go the other way, but it's not that way. You got to go that way. Oh, bless her. At least she has a good sense of humor about it. And she's not, because I've known some people who, when their elderly parents got dementia and stuff like that, they had to put them in a home because they would just get too violent. And, at least Mary Lou has a good sense of humor and is, soft-spoken and that kind of thing. Because, yeah, I can see it being a lot tougher than it is. So Lawrence says, Rex and I went live the other night and Mantis joined us, who was very, very late when we started. And I did not want to wake you. Oh, bless your heart. I finally got back on a normal sleep schedule last night. So I appreciate it. Okay, Kevin Edwards says, we don't use aluminum pots. I have only one pot in my whole house and it is aluminum. Oh, you might want to get rid of that thing. Because I remember like thick aluminum pots when I was growing up as a kid that my parents had. And yeah, they don't make them anymore. So yeah, it's steel and Teflon and stuff like that. And yeah, with aluminum pots, not good at all. Wondering, Violin Mantis says, hey fam, been lurking and cleaning. I pray for Mary Lou. Oh, thank you. Okay, if you're lurking, that's fine. I totally understand. That's your style, hon. You get down with you. So, but anyway, let's get back to the book. We've gotten pretty far on this chapter tonight, so I'm proud of us. Yes, especially acidic foods, because it reacts with the coating of the aluminum and creates bad things for the brain. So thank you, Shaman, for validating that. All right, so career and marriage. We're talking about how we are destroying the younger generations. The women at all female-dominated institutes of higher education are finding it increasingly difficult to arrange a dating relationship of even moderate duration. In consequence, they must settle, if inclined, for a hookup or sequential hookups. Perhaps this is a move forward in terms of sexual liberation, but I doubt it. I think it's terrible for the girls, as a stable, loving relationship is highly desirable for men as well as women. For women, however, it is often what is most wanted, even unconsciously. Even for women who think that they are quote-unquote career-driven, a lot of times it's just a matter of time and age and things like that when they realize, oh crap, I wish I had gotten married and now I just have a house full of cats. So, some of these things they think that, oh, they're being empowered women, and no, you're making a mistake, honey, and it's going to bite you in the ass. From 1997 to 2012, according to the Pew Research Center, the number of women aged 18 to 34 who said that a successful marriage is one of the most important things in life rose from 28% to 38%, an increase of more than 30%. The number of young women who said the same thing declined 15% over the same period, from 35 to 29%. During that time, the proportion of married people over 18 continued to decline, down from 3/4 in 1960 to half now. Finally, among never married adults aged 30 to 59, men are 3 times as likely as women to say they do not ever want to marry, 27 versus 8%. That's terrifying. Who decided anyway that career is more important than love and family? Is working 80 hours a week at a high-end law firm truly worth the sacrifices required for that kind of success? And if it is worth it, why is it worth it? A minority of people, mostly men who score low in the trait of agreeableness, again, are hyper-competitive and want to win at any cost. A minority will find the work intrinsically fascinating, but most aren't and most won't, and money doesn't seem to improve people's lives once they have enough to avoid the bill collectors. Furthermore, most high-performing and high-earning females have high-performing and high-earning partners, and that matters more to women. The Pew data also indicate that a spouse with a desirable job is a high priority for almost 80% of never married but marriage-seeking women, but for less than 50% of men. Men don't care if their wives don't work. They actually take pride in being able to support a wife. That's something that shows off, your prowess as a man. And we know that from biblical times. The more wives that you could have, the more awesome of a guy you were, because you could support all those women and their children. That meant that you were hardcore. So like Job with his wives and his children, all his children and stuff like that, he was extremely successful. So, Survival says the woman said she would get into arguments with Trump supporters, conservative men, and would find herself waking up in bed with them the next morning. Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. We don't understand, our conscious mind is not the same thing as our unconscious mind. Yeah, I can totally see why that would happen, and especially women. We often think that we know our own mind, and we really don't. We get men anchor us and make us more stable. Yeah, I'm going to go back to Peterson. When they hit their 30s, most of the top-rate female lawyers bail out of their high-pressure careers. Only 15% of equity partners at the 200 biggest law firms are women. This figure hasn't changed much in the last 15 years, even though female associates and staff attorneys are plentiful. It also isn't because law firms don't want the women to stay around and succeed. There is a chronic shortage of excellent people, regardless of sex, and law firms are desperate to retain them. The women who leave want a job and a life that allows them some time. After law school and articulating and the few first years of work, they develop other interests. This is common knowledge in the big firms, although it is not something that people are comfortable articulating in public, men and women alike. I recently watched a McGill University professor, female, lecture a room full of female law partners or near partners about how lack of child care facilities and, quote, male definitions of success impeded their career progress and caused women to leave. I knew most of the women in the room. We had talked at great length. I knew that none of this was at all the problem. They had nannies and they could afford them. They already outsourced all their domestic obligations and necessities. They understood as well, and perfectly well, that it was the market that defined success, not the men that they worked for. If you are earning $650 an hour in Toronto as a top lawyer and your client in Japan phones you at 4 a.m. on a Sunday, you answer now. You answer now, even if you have just gone back to sleep after feeding the baby. You answer because some hyper-ambitious legal associate in New York would be happy to answer if you don't. And that's why the market defines the work. The increasing short supply of university-educated men poses a problem of the increasing severity for women who want to marry as well as date. First, women have a strong proclivity to marry across or up the economic dominance hierarchy. They prefer a partner of equal or greater status. This holds true cross-culturally. The same does not hold, by the way, for men who are perfectly willing to marry across or down, as Pew data indicate, although they show a preference for somewhat younger mates. They trend towards the hollowing out of the middle class has also been increasingly as resource-rich women tend more and more to partner with resource-rich men. Because of this, and because of the decline in high-paying manufacturing jobs for men, 1 of 6 men of employable age is currently without work in the U.S., and remember when this was written, before COVID. Marriage is now something increasingly reserved for the rich. I can't help finding it amusing in a blackly ironic manner. The oppressive patriarchal institution of marriage has now become a luxury. Why would the rich tyrannize themselves? They have no reason to. This is me commenting. They have no reason to. They have all the money, all the power, everything else. Why would they submit themselves to a patriarchal system? They wouldn't. It has nothing to do with patriarchy. And why people think that this somehow has to do with patriarchy is just a BS myth that we need to get over. I will be so happy when we stop this. It's the patriarchy thing. Oh my gosh, I'll be so happy. Why do women want an employed partner and preferably one of higher status? In no small part, it's because women become more vulnerable when they have children. See, so this is something biological in us. They need someone competent to support mother and child when that becomes necessary. Even if you don't want to have kids, this is hardwired into you. It's perfectly rational, compensatory act, although it may have a biological basis. I just said that. Why would a woman who decides to take responsibility for 1 or more infants want an adult to look after as well? Yeah. So the unemployed working man is an undesirable specimen. And the single motherhood, an undesirable alternative. Children in father-absent homes are 4 times as likely to be poor. This means that their mothers are poor too. Fatherless children are at a much greater risk for drug and alcohol abuse. Children living with married biological parents are less anxious, depressed, and delinquent than children living with 1 or more non-biological parents. Children in single-parent families are also twice as likely to commit suicide. That's huge. Twice as likely. The strong turn towards political correctness in universities has exacerbated the problem. The voices shouting against oppression have become louder, it seems, in precise proportion to how equal, even now increasingly skewed against men, the schools have become. There are whole disciplines in universities forthrightly hostile towards men. There are areas of study dominated by the postmodern/neo-Marxist claim that Western culture, in particular, is an oppressive structure created by white men to dominate and exclude women and other select groups, successful only because of that domination and exclusion, which is a bunch of crap. Anybody knows it's a bunch of crap. So much crap. So, let's see, we're at 9:15. We got a little more to go. Patriarchy, help or hindrance? Of course, culture is an oppressive structure. It's always been that way. I mean, if you're with me in the studies, of Cain and Abel in the Bible, society was an oppressive structure to Cain and Abel. We're talking about, 30,000 years ago, if not more. So don't tell me that, it's just a new thing. It's just this male hierarchy that has made it. No, culture itself is and always has been an oppressive structure. So it is a fundamental, universally existential reality. The tyrannical king is a symbolic truth, an archetypical constant. What we inherit from the past is willfully blind and out of date. It's a ghost, a machine, and a monster. It must be rescued, repaired, and kept at bay by the attention and effort of the living. It crushes as it hammers us into socially acceptable shape, and it wastes great potential. But it offers great gain, too. Every word we speak is a gift from our ancestors. Every thought we think was previously thought by somebody smarter. The highly functional infrastructure that surrounds us, particularly in the West, is a gift from our ancestors. The comparatively uncorrupt political and economic systems, the technology, the wealth, the lifespan, the freedom, the luxury, and the opportunity. Culture takes with one hand, but in some fortunate places, it gives more with the other. To think about culture as only oppressive is ignorant and ungrateful as well as dangerous. This is not to say, as I am hoping the content of this book has made abundantly clear so far, that culture should not be subject to criticism. Consider this as well in regard to oppression. Any hierarchy creates winners and losers. The winners are, of course, more likely to justify the hierarchy and the losers to criticize it. But one, the collective pursuit of any valued goal produces a hierarchy, as some will be better and some will be worse at that pursuit no matter what it is. And two, it is the pursuit of goals that in large part lends life a sustaining meaning. We experience almost all emotions that make life deep and engaging as a consequence of moving successfully towards something deeply desired and valued. The price we pay for that involvement is the inevitable creation of hierarchies of success, while the inevitable consequence is difference in outcome. Absolute equality would therefore require the sacrifice of value itself. And then there would be nothing worth living for. We might instead note with gratitude that a complex, sophisticated culture allows for many games and many successful players, and that a well-structured culture allows the individuals that compose it to play and win in many different fashions. It is also perverse to consider culture the creation of men. Perverse. Culture is symbolically, archetypically, mythically male. That's partly why the ideas of the patriarchy are so easily swallowed. but is certainly the creation of humankind, not the creation of men, let alone white men, who nonetheless contributed their fair share. European culture has only been dominant to the degree that it is dominant at all for about 400 years. On the time scale of cultural evolution, which is to be measured at minimum in thousands of years, such a time span barely registers. I'm going to disagree with him on this point, because white, a lot of people, I've run across this in videos on TikTok and whatnot, where people don't realize that Egypt is in Africa, and people also don't realize that Egypt was ruled by white people, the Greeks. Ptolemy is Greek. PT is Greek spelling. It's not something that exists in Egyptian. And the Ptolemaic Seleucid Empire, that empire of the Egyptians, those were white people. That was Alexander the Great's generals. Okay? And they created Cleopatra was a white woman. All right? So yeah, the white culture dominating the West has been true for a few thousand years. So, all right. But on the time scale of cultural evolution, this still holds true when it's a few thousand years. Such a time span barely registers, because you got to remember, we're like 70,000 years old as human sapien is I think 140,000 years old. So yeah, 4,000 years out of 140,000 years, yeah, it doesn't even register. So furthermore, even if women contribute nothing substantial to art, leisure, and the sciences prior to the 1960s, which is bullshit, and the feminist revolution, which is not something I believe, the role they played raising children and working on the farms was still instrumental in raising boys and freeing up men, a very few men, so that humanity could propagate itself and strive forward. And a lot of the stuff that we thought was, men doing it was just women doing it under a pseudonym. And that's happened forever. I mean, the first cross-dressers, the first transgender people were women acting like men so that they could compete in male hierarchies. Here's an alternative theory. Throughout history, men and women both struggled terribly for freedom from the overwhelming horrors of privation and necessity. Women were often at a disadvantage during that struggle, as they had all the vulnerabilities of men with the extra reproductive burden and less physical strength. In addition to the filth, misery, disease, starvation, cruelty, and ignorance that characterized the lives of both sexes, back before the 20th century, when even people in the Western world typically existed on less than $1 a day in today's money, women also had to put up with the serious practical inconveniences of menstruation, the high probability of unwanted pregnancy, the chance of death or serious damage during childbirth, and the burden of too many young children. Perhaps that is sufficient reason for the different legal and practical treatment of men and women that characterizes most societies prior to the recent technological revolutions, including the invention of birth control pills. At least such things might be taken into account before the assumption that men tyrannized women is an accepted truism. It looks to me like the so-called oppression of the patriarchy was instead an imperfect collective attempt by men and women stretching over millennia to free each other from privation, disease, and drudgery. The recent case of the, Arun Chalam Magrandinam, whatever. This is a name. I can't pronounce it. It's on page 304. You can read it for yourselves. But this man, the tampon king of India, became unhappy because his wife had to use dirty rags during her menstrual period. She told him it was either expensive sanitary napkins or milk for the family. He spent the next 14 years in a state of insanity by his neighbor's judgment, trying to rectify the problem. Even his wife and his mother abandoned him briefly, terrified as they became of his obsession. When he ran out of female volunteers to trust his project, he took to wearing a bladder of pig's blood as a replacement. I can't see how this behavior would have improved his popularity or status. Now his low-cost and locally made napkins are distributed across India, manufactured by women-run self-help groups. His users have been provided with freedom they never previously experienced. In 2014, this high school dropout was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. I am unwilling to consider this personal gain this gentleman's primary motivation. Is he part of the patriarchy? And I can give another example. Let's talk about the man who invented Band-Aids. He invented them because his wife was clumsy and he was constantly bandaging her up, and he wanted a way to be able to do it quickly to stop the bleeding. And so he came up with the prepared sanitary adhesive strips with that, whatever you call it, to staunch the wound. So, it's men and women, it's the men who loved women and wanted to help them. Men have this almost built-in desire to save the women in their lives. And this is a good thing. And we have become women have succeeded only because of these men willing to do this kind of stuff for us. So to blame the hierarchy for our inability to get forward is just an absolute farce, and it's insulting. So, oh my gosh, sorry I've been skipping over all your comments and stuff like that. I'm going to go back and watch these. And I need to figure out why nobody can comment on my last video too. Because YouTube did something and turned off the ability to comment. And so I don't know what happened, and I'll try and fix it. But women have to put up with everything. Men also have to put up with everything. Yeah. I mean, the arrogance of this whole idea of the patriarchy, and that it's just to keep women from competing with men. It's like, are you high? Political correctness was a term that I first heard when I was in high school. I was a senior. My sister was a sophomore. And we both laughed at the idea. We're like, okay, maybe politicians have to talk that way because, their constituents are made up of all sorts of people. Okay, yeah. But political correctness for regular people, are you kidding me? And now political correctness is people will beat you over the head if you aren't politically correct. And it's like, I'm not a politician. Why do I need to be politically correct? It's just, so Ryzen said, I need a girl to ride. I need women in my life, but I don't want the drama of a baby mama. But I mean, you do, because you want progeny, but you want a girl you can stick by. Who isn't going to do crazy stuff like, beat the back of your head with a frying pan. And, women, I mean, just the kind of stuff that's being, WAP. Let's talk about that for a second. And all the rap songs out there right now are just talking about using and abusing men for sex. and not giving them anything. If a guy's not rich, he's not going to get any access. And it's like, no wonder incels are a thing. And it drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely nuts. All of it. I mean, we've got to start realizing that men aren't out to get women, that women, unfortunately, have been taught to, be out there to get men. And we need to stop that crap, because you're not going to find a man who wants to stick with you if you're going to be that kind of vulture. Women are only bringing it on themselves, and it drives me nuts to see it. So, but anyway, we are at 9:30. So we are at the 2-hour mark. Thank you, everybody, for staying tonight, and we will hopefully get through chapter 11 in the next couple of sessions. But Survival says, when I was a senior in high school, the Republicans were in charge of the political correctness. Well, yeah, I mean, the whole what was it? The parental warning label on albums. I mean, that just made us want to buy the albums more. That's the dumbest thing. It's the same thing with, anybody who gets censored now. It's like, oh, you censored them? Well, they must have something to say that I want to hear, because the powers that be, you guys are all boring and fuddy-duddy and whatever. We don't want to listen to your crap anymore. So people go rushing to the other direction. And so this stuff backfires every single time. But yeah, I remember that it was the Republicans and what was her name? Tipper? No, that was Tipper Gore. The woman who was, I don't remember, but she did the whole parental lyric stuff. And then you had Nancy Reagan with Just Say No, and just all this stupid stuff. So, but yeah, I gotta let you guys go. It's been a great night, except for all the sad news. But thank you, Shaman. Thank you for saying that it's another good show. And I totally agree. Just say no to the drama channel. Just say no. And I hope you all have a great night. Thank you for being here. And I will see you on Saturday. Bye. Love you all. My pain